What is a trend that you currently see or you've seen before that if you could do away with, you would be the happiest with? To give you an example, there was the trend of planking. Everyone planked for the longest time. And at first I was like, I want to be part of this, until I realized kind of how stupid it was. And then I was just like, why? And you would see everyone everywhere just planking on a constant basis and then posting pictures all the time of them planking. And after a while, it just got annoying and boring. There's lots of different trends. It might not just be a social media trend. Growing up, there was a trend where at least a lot of my friends, everyone needed to get their ears pierced. And if you didn't get your ears pierced, well, then you were a loser. And apparently I was the loser because I didn't get my ear pierced. But here's the thing. Have you ever seen certain trends that you're like, I could do without that? What are some trends that you see or have seen in the past that you're like, if I could get rid of those, I would get rid of those? Let me ask you another question. What does it mean to cancel someone? Or maybe a deeper question would be, if you've heard this term used, some of you may know it, some of you may not, but what is cancel culture? Well, see, now when it comes to cancel culture, I mean, some people see it as good, some people see it as bad. It depends on when it's working in your favor and when it's not. But as a whole, it's when people are called out, when they're shamed publicly, when they're boycotted, when the goal is to kind of cancel them out of whatever roles, whatever jobs, whatever focus. It's really drawing some attention to people in probably the worst ways and getting a gang to gang up on them. I know that sounds very, abusive, bullying, and yet we see it kind of on a constant basis. I mean, even if you look at social media right now, who are some of the people that cancel culture has kind of been after? Whether it's good or bad, I mean, we've seen people go after Ellen DeGeneres. We've seen people go after politicians. Most importantly, most recently was the character of Cara Dune, the actress that plays her. There was this whole boycott because of certain things that she said that were kind of taken out of context, and then certain posts that, while other people posted things along those lines, people didn't like what she posted. And so this whole group ganged up, attacked her, and eventually got her fired from her job. See, cancel culture for some people seems like a great thing, but until cancel culture comes after you, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, we're back to high school where bullying rules. So today and over the next couple weeks, I want to talk to you guys about cancel culture, but not so much cancel culture as we see in social media. See, the truth is we carry with us this ability to cancel out others. Maybe because of how they look, how they act, who they're around, what we think we know about them, what we don't like about them. But we have to be careful that we don't become the same type of group of people that gang up and bully others, whether in front of their faces or behind their backs. We don't want to be the people that go around canceling out each other. So we're going to dive into this. Welcome to Epic Youth Ministry. So I've been working with teens for a long time. As a youth pastor in ministry, I've been working with them for over a decade or so. And I have had lots of unique students. I try not to play any favoritism. Did that once or twice and it backfired on me. Because sometimes the students that you would consider your favorite, maybe because they seem to excel in their walk with God or they're volunteering and all that kind of stuff, are the first ones to get burnt out or turn away. So I try not to show favoritism because the truth is that each student is unique. Each student is a blessing. But I had one student. I've had some problematic students over the years, but there is one student that I would label probably the worst student I had. And this is before I ever became a youth pastor. I was volunteering as a junior high pastor. And I had this student. and our junior high ministry was starting to blossom and grow, and we had about, at the time, we had about close to, I want to say, 20 kids that were coming out to the junior high ministry, and that was just strictly 7th and 8th graders. And so I remember I was like on fire. It's always great when you see a ministry thriving numerically, which doesn't always mean it's thriving spiritually, but it was kind of doing both. And so I remember I got into one of the weeks, and we had a bunch of new students, and it was great. And there was this student. Now, I'm not going to say this student's name, but this student sat in the back the first week. And I still remember that first week because this student wore a Superman hoodie. And if you know anything about me, I love superheroes. Superman's emblem, I have it on pajamas, I have it on shirts, I have it on sweatshirts. So immediately I was like, me and this student are going to get along great. This is going to be awesome. And I remember I was like 2 minutes into my message, and this student made a comment, just kind of a flippant comment, aimed at me that was very rude, and everyone in the room kind of like went, whew. And I was like, okay, well, we're just going to keep it down right now. And I started going on, and I asked a question, and this student raised their hand to answer, and the student's answer was like nothing to do with the question, but it was more of an insult at me. And what happened is, over the next couple of weeks, as this student kept on coming out, more and more, I almost felt like I was being bullied by this student. This student was mean, kind of degrading, made fun of me, like tore me down. And it's really bad, and maybe a kind of reflection of my self-conscious at the time, because here it was, a 7th grader that was destroying my self-esteem. But here's the sad thing. The sad thing is, as much as this student came out and as much as the student responded, as mean as the student was to me, my reaction to the student was not the best. We live, we learn, we make mistakes. I remember it got to the point maybe after week 4 where I would get in and all the students would come over, and then I would see this student come in and I'd be like, oh no, not her. I wouldn't say it out loud, but I would think it inside. Anytime she would raise her hand, I'd be like, no, not you. No. Over time, I actually found that when I was praying for my students, I try to make a point to pray for my students by name. It's why I find it so important to try to memorize what everyone's name is, so that when I'm praying, I have directed prayer for each and every student. And I remember when it came to this student, I would sadly pray that student wouldn't come out that week. That Friday night, the student wouldn't come, because I was like, it is so much better when this student isn't here. I just like it better, God, if they're not that. Maybe make them busy. Give them new friends that can't bring them out to a church. There we go. Those are awful, awful prayers. And what would happen is, and what I found was, over time, I started canceling this girl out. Because I didn't like the way that she acted to me, treated me. I mean, she wasn't one of those like super irreverent students. She was just sarcastic beyond all means, and just for some reason, I was the focus of it all. And over time, I just canceled her out. I would ignore her. I would pray that she wouldn't show up. I would, when she did, I would almost get depressed because she's there. I know it sounds awful saying this as a youth pastor, but this was my attitude towards her. See, it wasn't until later that I found out that her family life was not the best. It wasn't until later that I found out a good friend of mine, family had taken her and her sister in. Now here's the crazy thing. After that, I ended up giving her another chance. And over time, I developed a very close friendship with her and the entire family. Even now, she's what I would consider a good friend and a student that I like to check in on. And I'm so proud of how her and her sister have just developed in their life and the families that they have and everything like that. But I would have missed the opportunity if I continued to live in this cancel culture for her, because I didn't like the way that she acted or the things that she said. Now, here's the thing. I know that makes me sound bad, but I think I'm not alone in this. I think if we're honest, there have been times that we have tried to cancel others out. We have ignored them, pushed them away, said things to others about them or said things just to ourselves about them for many different reasons, but I think I'm not alone in this whole idea that I have at times tried to cancel other people out. In fact, if you look at the Bible, we're going to jump in and there is a big rivalry that's going on. Now, do you guys know of any big sports rivalries? For me, I grew up right near Boston, so I am, Patriots all the way, even when they're awful. I am Red Sox all the way, even when they're awful. Now, granted, I don't follow every game. I know I'm not that hardcore, but I grew up loving the Red Sox. And there is probably no bigger, maybe one or two, but no bigger rivalry than the Yankees and the Red Sox. And I remember years and years and years ago when I was in youth ministry, we did this big scavenger hunt in Boston. And the Red Sox had just barely made it into, I think it was like one of the final games of the playoffs to see who's going to get in the World Series. And it was in Boston, in Fenway Park, and it was against the Yankees the very same day that we are doing this whole scavenger hunt. And as we're walking through Boston, there's a little bit of rivalry between, the different teams that are competing in this scavenger hunt. And way off in the distance, we're walking by Fenway Park, way off in the distance, we see one of the other teams that we are playing against in this scavenger hunt. We are right next to Fenway Park as people are lined up around the park several times to try to get tickets for this event. Hardcore Red Sox fans. And over comes one of the youth leaders looking at our team. Again, we're playing in this scavenger hunt. And he yells down to us, "You guys suck! You're going to lose! You're going to do awful! Go back home!" Now, we didn't need to say anything back because all of the Red Sox fans in line thought that they were Yankees fans, referring to the Red Sox fans. And if it was just for the fact that they were standing in line and would lose their place, there would have been a riot on their hands because everyone started turning around and they started cussing out this other team. They started yelling at them. They started screaming at them. A couple people threw things at them. And the youth leader's like, "Oh my God, no, I didn't mean. There's a huge rivalry between Yankees and Red Sox. And when we look in the Bible, there's actually, this story comes from a huge rivalry that is going on. It's between the Jewish people and the Samaritans. There's a lot of different reasons for it. They argued about where they were supposed to worship. There was this whole idea that the Samaritan people at one point had intermarried. There were once Jewish people that had intermarried with other races and other religions. And then even jumping back to, if you were with us in the series that we're doing on Sundays where we called it Goals, and it was all about Nehemiah rebuilding the wall, the Samaritans were against the rebuilding of the wall. So all of that to say, the big rivalry between the two kind of boiled down to religious differences, cultural differences, and political differences. Basically, the trifecta of bad differences that can tear people apart. There was bad blood between them. In fact, oftentimes a Jewish person, if they needed to get to one of the cities or the countries on the other side of Samaria, they would choose to go all the way around to get to where they needed to go. An extra day or two's journey instead of going through Samaria. Because you didn't interact with a Samaritan. You didn't talk to them. You didn't interact whatsoever with them. And the same was said for the Samaritans. They didn't interact with the Jewish people or whatever. There was this big rivalry. And yet we jump down to John chapter 4. In verse 4, it starts off with Jesus going with his disciples. And in verse 4 it says, he, meaning Jesus, had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from a long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. And she said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" I mean, Jesus has this conversation with her. And what's crazy is the conversation continues, and I'm just going to summarize. Basically, they start talking about water and living water and all that kind of stuff. And then he says, hey, go get your husband. And she's like, I don't actually have a husband. And then Jesus kind of calls her out. Luckily, it's just those two. And he's like, yeah, actually, you don't. You've had 5, and the guy that you're living with right now isn't your husband. In society back then, that was taboo. Not good. And then she says, wow, you seem like you know your stuff. So Samaritans and Jews argue where we should worship. Where should we worship? And they go back and forth, and eventually Jesus reveals to her, one of the first people that he reveals it to, who is a Samaritan. He reveals to her that he is the Messiah. And then she leaves to tell others tell others about Jesus. She goes into the town. And in John chapter 4, verse 39, it says this, many Samaritans from the villages believed in Jesus because the woman had said, he told me everything I ever did. When they came out to see him, they begged him to stay in their village. So he stayed for 2 days, long enough for many more to hear his message and believe. Think about this. Jesus interacted with the Samaritans. In fact, he ended up staying with them, and the way that he treated them, despite the rivalry, was so great that they actually invited him to stay because they wanted to hear more, despite all of the bad blood. I mean, in this story, it starts off with, first off, Jesus talking to a woman, which back then, that was, especially if you don't know them or all that kind of stuff, you had to be very careful. So even just interacting with her was against the cultural norm. In fact, if you look at the Bible is one of the few places back in those days that would actually lift up women. It talks about how these women were in the genealogy of Jesus. It talks about one of the female judges who did amazing, great things. The Bible actually lifts up and shows how great females are and the power that they can have compared to a lot of other groups, religions, texts from those days and cultures that kind of push the woman to the side. So first off, he's interacting with her as a woman, which is like, whoa. And then she reveals that she's an outcast. As I said, the idea that she's had so many husbands and she's living with a guy that isn't her husband, that is taboo. She was probably avoiding a lot of people in the town, and yet Jesus talked to her despite her being an outcast, despite people possibly looking and being like, oh, he's talking to her. That's not good. And then he talks to her despite her being a Samaritan, despite all of the bad blood and the rivalry. Here's the thing, despite all of those things, he values and respects her. Instead of letting all of those differences and what people would say and think bother him, he interacts and engages with her, and amazing things happen from that. And honestly, give credit to where credit is due, she did the same thing. She could have been like, no, we don't get along, we don't talk, you're a guy, nope. But she interacted with him, she asked him questions. They both bridged a gap that most people wouldn't have wanted to bridge. Despite their differences in values, in culture, in beliefs, they found common ground and interacted with each other. It didn't stop them from talking, from them caring for each other. And it definitely didn't stop Jesus from respecting her. So, really briefly, guys, no pull punches. Let me ask you this. Who are you currently struggling to love? I'm not talking about like a deep relationship, infatuation style love, but I'm talking about the love that cares for a fellow human being. A care that for that person, a love that says if they're in need, I'm going to help them. A love that says I'm going to go out of my way for them. Who is it in your life that you are currently struggling to love? For some, unfortunately, it could be people of different races, different colors. For some of us, it's harder to love someone, and believe me, we've seen this blow up on social media and just across every type of media. But we have a hard time loving people that have different political points of views. We have a hard time sometimes loving people that have different religious points of view. Who have we stopped respecting, caring for, listening to, and instead we've tried to cancel them outright? See, the truth is, when we see it in social media and even honestly with cancel culture and everything like that, it can be very dangerous. Because yes, we feel like justice needs to be served, but the problem is when a mob mentality comes over people and they gang up and attack people without ever giving them a chance to defend themselves or trial or error, if they just don't like you, it means that in essence, they can cancel you. And in the same way, sometimes we have to be careful that we don't do the same thing. That just because I don't like someone based on their color, their religion, their race, their background, or whatever, that I don't cancel them out and then get all my friends to cancel them out. That's a dangerous game to play. Think about this. The Jews and the Samaritans really thought that they were doing God's work by avoiding, ignoring, and mistreating the other. They didn't see anything wrong with it. In the Jewish mind, they thought that the Samaritans were less, and because of that, God was okay with them treating them that way. And in the Samaritans' mind, they thought the Jews were less and wrong, and because of that, God was okay with them doing that. In the end, they twisted their mind in such a way that God was okay with them ignoring, attacking, and mistreating another group of people. And yet, what did Jesus do? Jesus said, no, that's not the way, and he bridged the gap. So my question to you guys is, who do you find annoying? Who are you angry with, or maybe you're uncomfortable around? Who do you make fun of or bully on a constant basis? Who do you overlook or avoid? See, I think we all struggle with loving people at times. There are going to be some people that it's easier to and some people that it's harder to. And it's hard to love them, but unfortunately it's easy for us to cancel them, to avoid them, to push them away. And while that is the easier thing today, I want to challenge you to do the harder thing. And that is to choose to follow Jesus' example and love them. This doesn't mean that you have to force your way to try to change their mind, their attitudes, their backgrounds, even their belief in religion. I fully believe that if I am developing a good relationship with someone and they see Jesus living in me in the way that I act and the way that I live, and when I have opportunities, I just share what God has done in my life, then over time, they are going to want that. But if I go in and immediately say, hey, my name is Josh, I know you believe this, let me twist your mind on that, odds are I'm going to chase them away. Can you interact and love others if they have a different political point of view, if they have a different religious point of view, if they have a different cultural point of view? Can you do first and foremost that by loving them and choosing not to cancel them out? Because believe me, I wish that a lot of cancel culture would do that. Whatever side of the board that you're on. See, God wants us to love people who aren't like us. So here's what I want you to do. When we're in person, we have a little bit more to this experience, but what I want you guys to do is I want you to grab a piece of paper and a pen. Pen, because it's a lot harder to erase than pencil. And I want you to write down a person that you are having a hard time loving. Or maybe it's a group of people that you are having a hard time loving. And then I want you to write down why you're having a hard time loving them. What are the reasons? Don't give you like huge example, but like what are the main reasons? They believe differently than me. They look differently than me. They act differently. What are some of the reasons that you do that? And then I want you to keep that piece of paper somewhere nearby when you have your times where you're reading your Bible, where you're praying, where you're just thinking on things. And I want you to remember, not that this is why I don't like them, but that they have value in God's eyes. And so they should have value in our eyes. Would you pray with me? Father God, I pray that you would be with each and every student within the sound of my voice, and I pray that you would help us to not be part of a cancel culture when it comes to others. That we would choose to love others that aren't like us. I pray that we would see them as valuable, as valued works of art that you have created as well, Lord God. And that instead of going in and trying to change people on a constant basis, we would first learn to love them and then live a life of example, Lord God. And when we find those ins that we can share and that we can show them and see them start transforming, that is great, and take those opportunities. But let it start with love. Let us be people of love. Remind us right now of anyone that we have tried to cancel out in some way, some form. And help us instead to live a life of love for them, to them. In your name, amen. All right, guys, don't forget, if you are watching this video as it is just put out, March 3rd, there is not going to be a video. It's just going to be in person. We're going to be in the main worship center, and we're doing a worship experience. Don't forget, whether you watch online or in person, we constantly have Wednesdays and Sundays in person. You guys are more than welcome to come on out. We look forward to seeing you guys again, and we are planning lots and lots of stuff for this coming year. Pandemic or not, we're doing stuff. So, love you guys, miss you, can't wait to see you soon. All right, have a good day.